One of the biggest problems that we're having in Newburgh is the shelter problem of what to do with not only the chronic homeless, but people that are living from friend to friend or on the street, off the street, don't have a place to go. Currently, Newburgh has 4 shelters, but we only have 2 transitional programs. That's a huge issue, and we have so many that are homeless in our community. And not only are all the shelters just in the city of Newburgh, but they can be in surrounding areas as well. We did have a permanent shelter that did house males, and that was in a church, but recently that closed down in November due to some funding issues they were having. So we don't really have a spot for the homeless to go to. Um, One of the biggest things is we need to come up with more transitional housing programs. It's great to take people off the street and put them into shelters, but if we don't have case managers and caseworkers, social workers, mental health counselors, really helping and guiding the homeless, then we're never really going to accomplish anything. We have a wonderful program. It is called Project Life, which is a housing program. And that program has been around since 1989, but has really flourished in 1992. It's New York State licensed. It is a tier 2 shelter. It is one of our transitional housing programs. Currently, they accept 10 families. And what they do is they're able to stay there up to a year. There's daycare, there's intensive case management to help them get a job, to help them get more stable housing in the future. We need to have more programs like that to figure out ways of funding. Just by putting people in and out of shelters on a day-to-day basis, we're not making any progress. And I think that's kind of where Newburgh is in the stance that we are in now. The other thing is not only the housing issues, but the program issues overall. So somebody's homeless, they come into a shelter. If we're able to provide them case management, we want them to get stable housing, get medical care, go to DSS and apply for services, try and work with an unemployment counselor. But what we're not also realizing is this can be extremely overwhelming for someone that's homeless, chronic or not. The city is not that large, but not all of the services are right here in the city of Newburgh. So they could be in surrounding areas in Middletown, which is another community about 30 minutes away. I would like to have more team programs and more of a kind of one-stop shop for all of these services. If we could have services in one building, it would make it easier for someone who is dealing with being homeless, being able to go into one building, see a counselor for mental health, see a counselor for jobs, see a counselor for a bunch of different reasons, instead of saying, okay, well, now you don't have a place to stay, so you're staying in this shelter, and now you need to go to place A and B and C and D. That makes it quite difficult for somebody and can also be extremely overwhelming. So that is a second thing that I really think we need to do. Number one, we need to have more permanent solutions to homelessness, and that includes transitional housing. I know we're putting a lot of money, or people want to put a lot of money into, let's open a shelter, let a church open a shelter, instead of taking that money and opening up kind of shops, I guess you could say, at different places just for a short-term time. We need to look in ways that we can provide transitional housing long-term, where we can maybe house 25 to 50 families. We need to not just say this shelter's for women or this shelter's for men, because we do have young people. There is no shelter for young adults in the city of Newburgh. Young adults, I believe the closest shelter is like 20 to 25 minutes away. So I would like to have an all-inclusive shelter that we could put youth, families, mothers, fathers, just women and men in general, to those specific shelters and provide them intensive case management. I think if we were able to get them into a shelter and to start providing like a team approach with treatment and come up with a plan, have them be part of it. How did you end up homeless? What can we do? What's the plan? And kind of lay it out with them. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Then we may be able to get them into more permanent solutions for housing. And that brings me to my third point. What we also need to look at is once somebody's done with transitional housing, then what? We don't have many programs that are income-based. In this area, we do have a couple, but for instance, I was able to check on some of the waiting lists at some of these communities. At one community, we have 70 townhomes. Right now, the waiting list is up to 5 years. That doesn't help somebody that's trying to get housing, that's moving from transitional housing. We do have another place. It has 65 apartments. The wait time there is up to 2 years. So not only do we need to come up with transitional housing for somebody to come into, or transitional shelter, I should say, but we also need to come up with more permanent housing. Whether we start building more communities, we have tons and tons of buildings that nobody's using, they're run down, people are knocking them down, and we're not rebuilding, taking maybe some of that money and rebuilding into some of these communities where people are not going to have to wait 5 years for housing and could have housing. Maybe they enter transitional housing. Maybe we say you can stay in transitional housing for 6 months. During that 6 months time, we're able to get somebody's, mental health status under control. We're able to help them gain employment, have access to services. So by the time that 6 months is up, we're able to put them right into a permanent apartment. Those would be my 3 biggest concerns for Newburgh right now, and the 3 ways that I think we should start looking at and helping. Thanks.